Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku fought aliens as the commander of Earth's space fleet. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The void was not silent. It was a misconception born of ancient stories, of times before humanity had learned to truly listen. Out here, in the abyssal dark between stars, there was a constant, subtle symphony. The low thrum of cosmic background radiation, the whisper of stellar winds carrying charged particles across light years, the gravitational groans of celestial bodies turning in their eons-long slumber. Aboard the Earth Defense Fleet flagship High, these cosmic murmurs were translated into a gentle, ambient hum that filled the cavernous space of the command bridge, a sound so constant it had become a form of silence itself. It was this silence that Commander Izuku Midoriya was dissecting. He stood before the main view screen, a vast, curved wall of armored plexiglass that offered an unfiltered, breathtaking vista of the Orion Arm. Nebulae bloomed in the distance like watercolor stains of violet, and rose against a canvas of infinite black, peppered with the diamond dust of a billion stars. His reflection was a faint ghost superimposed over the galaxy, a young man, barely into his 20s, yet carrying an ancient weight in the set of his shoulders. His green-black hair was a disciplined military cut, though a few rebellious curls insisted on falling across his brow. His uniform, a crisp, dark green tunic with stark white and gold piping, the EDF insignia of a shielded Earth over his heart, was immaculate. Only his eyes, a vibrant, analytical green, betrayed the storm of thought raging behind his calm exterior. And, of course, the muttering. If the hegemony fleet uses the gas giant's magnetosphere for a slingshot maneuver, standard evasion patterns would be insufficient. The gravitational shear would strain the particle weave armor past its tolerance point by at least 17%. We'd have to invert the primary shield polarity and vent plasma coolant to create a temporary counterfield, but that would leave the engine core exposed for 3.8 seconds, too long. A feint then? Draw them into the asteroid belt on the ecliptic plane? No, the debris is too dense, it would compromise fighter squadron mobility. Bakugo would never forgive a strategy that clipped his wings. His voice was a low, rapid-fire staccato, a stream of consciousness tactical analysis that had become legendary throughout the Third Fleet. New ensigns found it unnerving. His veteran crew found it reassuring. The commander's muttering meant his brain was running at 1,000 revolutions per minute, charting every possible future, every potential threat, and formulating 100 ways to overcome them. It was the sound of them staying alive. Commander. The voice, crisp and formal, cut through Izuku's monologue without breaking his concentration. First Officer Tenya Ida stood at his station to Izuku's right, a paragon of military discipline. His posture was ramrod straight, his blue uniform perfectly pressed. His console was a waterfall of cascading data streams, fleet readiness, power distribution, munitions counts, that would have been an incomprehensible blur to anyone else. For Ida, whose engine quirk allowed his brain to process information at speeds rivaling a supercomputer, it was a gentle stream. All squadrons report in. Patrol sectors are clear. Long-range sensors show no anomalies. We are, by all official metrics, experiencing a period of profound quiet, Ida stated, adjusting his rectangular glasses with a precise, practiced motion. Izuku's muttering ceased. He took a slow breath, the universe on the view screen seeming to expand as he refocused. The profound quiet is what worries me, Tenya. The hegemony aren't known for taking vacations. Indeed, sir. Statistically, a prolonged lack of engagement precedes a major offensive in 72% of recorded instances. From the communications hub on the opposite side of the bridge, a warmer, more melodic voice chimed in. Or maybe they finally realized they can't beat us and went home. Chief Communications Officer Ochako Uraraka offered a small, hopeful smile. She sat within a semicircular console, her hands hovering over holographic interfaces. Around her, several grapefruit-sized sensor drones floated in midair, their lights blinking softly. Her zero-gravity quirk wasn't for combat, it was for finesse. She manipulated the fleet's entire sensor and communications network as an extension of her own will, guiding swarms of stealth drones through stellar phenomena with a dancer's grace, untangling enemy encryption with an artist's touch. Izuku returned her smile, a faint but genuine expression that momentarily lifted the fatigue from his features. I'll believe that when I see it, Ochako. Keep the Deep Space Network on high alert. I want to know if a hegemony scout so much as sneezes 3 systems away. Aye, Commander, she replied, her fingers dancing as she recalibrated a drone swarm near a pulsar, its electromagnetic interference a tricky variable she navigated with ease. This was his crew. His family. Ida, the unwavering bedrock of order and procedure. Uraraka, the fleet's eyes and ears, its compassionate heart. And out there, patrolling the edge of the buffer zone, a crackle of static preceded a voice laced with impatience and explosive energy. Bridge, this is Cerberus 1. Are you done with your tea party yet? This sector is so dead, I'm about to start shooting asteroids for fun. And trust me, you don't want me to get creative with the ordnance. Wing Commander Katsuki Bakugo. Ace pilot, unholy terror of the starways, and Izuku's oldest, most complicated rival. Izuku moved to the command chair, a sleek, high-back throne of polished metal and memory foam at the center of the bridge, but he didn't sit. He rested a hand on its armrest, his knuckles white. Maintain patrol discipline, Cerberus 1. We're in a buffer zone for a reason. Don't give the hegemony an excuse to call us the aggressors. TCH. They're a race of planet-eating locusts, Deku. I think we're a little past worrying about intergalactic diplomacy. Bakugo shot back, the use of Izuku's childhood nickname a casual, almost reflexive barb. Just say the word, and my squadron will turn the next bug we see into stardust. King Explosion Murder is itching for a fight, Ida bristled. Commander, I must again formally object to Wing Commander Bakugo's unauthorized designation for his starfighter. Noted, Tenya, Izuku said, a hint of amusement in his tone. Just finish your sweep, Kaken. And try not to start any interstellar incidents before lunch. There was a grumbled acknowledgement before the channel fell silent. The brief exchange had shifted the atmosphere on the bridge. The quiet was still there, but it was now heavier, charged with the memory of why they were here. The war with the chitinous hegemony had been raging for nearly a decade. It was a brutal, grinding conflict against a foe that defied comprehension. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They were harvesters. They swarmed systems, consumed everything of value, organic life, minerals, energy, and moved on, leaving dead, hollowed-out worlds in their wake. Humanity, with its quark-fueled technological boom, had become a prime target, a veritable feast. The Earth Defense Fleet was the wall against that ravenous tide. And he, Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy obsessed with heroes, was now a commander on its front line. He finally sank into his command chair, the cool material of familiar comfort. The weight settled back onto his shoulders, a physical presence he could almost feel. It wasn't just the command of the Third Fleet, or the lives of the thousands of souls aboard the UA. It was the secret that hummed just beneath his skin, a hidden star coiled in his very marrow. One for all. He closed his eyes for a second, focusing inward. He could feel it, a wellspring of impossible power, a legacy passed down through generations. In this new age, it wasn't a secret past between street-level heroes. It was humanity's ultimate trump card, a strategic asset of last resort entrusted to a chosen commander. The story given to the fleet was that his strategic brilliance was a 1 in a billion mental quirk. Only a handful knew the truth. His mind drifted back to the day Admiral Tashinori Yagi had bestowed it upon him. Not in a blaze of glory on a beach, but in the sterile, zero-gravity training room of the EDF Academy. All Might, in his true skeletal form, his legendary strength sapped by an old, grievous wound from a battle that had saved Earth but cost him nearly everything. The history books will call me the symbol of peace, the man who united Earth and pushed us to the stars, Tashinori had said, his voice a reedy whisper that still held the thunder of his prime. But peace is a garden that must be constantly tended, my boy. And now, a swarm of locusts is at the gate. This power, one for all, is not a gift. It is a burden. It is the collective will of all who came before me, a promise that humanity will endure. It will amplify your thoughts, your resolve, your spirit. But it will also amplify your doubts and your fears. A true commander bears that weight so their soldiers don't have to. Can you do that, young Midoriya? Can you be the pillar that never breaks? Izuku had accepted, of course. How could he not? It was the culmination of his lifelong dream, twisted into a shape he'd never imagined. He wasn't a hero who saved people with a smile. He was a commander who sent them into battle, making impossible calculations where lives were the variables. Every decision, every order, every casualty report was a test of his worthiness. The gentle chime of the turbolift announcing a shift change pulled him from his reverie. The bridge crew began their seamless, practiced rotation. Ida formally handed over his station, briefing his replacement with meticulous detail. Uraraka stretched, a graceful arc of her body, before heading for the exit, pausing to give Izuku a concerned look. "Don't stay up all night redrawing battle plans again, Commander," she said softly. "Even pillars need to rest." He managed another small smile. "I'll try." Once the news shift had settled in and the bridge returned to its quiet hum, Izuku retreated to his own quarters. The space was Spartan, a stark contrast to the technological marvel of the bridge. A standard military cot, a small desk with a data pad, and a single personal item on the wall, a small, framed holographic emitter. He activated it, and the image of a much younger, scrawnier him standing next to the towering, golden age form of All Might flickered to life. It was a pre-DF publicity photo, a relic from a simpler time. He sank onto his cot, the silence of his room more profound, more empty, than that of the bridge. Here, there was no hum of the ship, no crew to distract him. There was only the low thrum of one for all in his veins and the faint, ghostly whispers in the back of his mind, the vestiges. They weren't distinct voices yet, more like impressions. A feeling of unshakable resolve he associated with Nana Shimura, a flicker of cold, hard pragmatism from another he didn't know, a chorus of echoes reinforcing his own sense of duty. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the soft ping from his desk console. He glanced over. It was a private message from Captain Shoto Todoroki, commander of the specialized cryo-dreadnought, the Endeavor's legacy. The message was characteristically blunt. Midori. Drills completed. My crew is at peak efficiency. Your last fleet-wide tactical simulation had a 4.7% margin of error in predicting our heat dispersal during sustained plasma cannon fire. I have corrected it. New data attached. We are ready when you are. Izuku couldn't help a small, wry grin. Todoroki was a man forged in the shadow of his brilliant, notoriously difficult father, Fleet Admiral N.G. Todoroki. He was cool, logical, and brutally efficient. His rivalry with Bakugo was a thing of fleet legend, a clash of fire and ice that somehow always resulted in spectacular victory. Yet, in his own way, Todoroki was as reliable as the Northern Star. His message was his version of a check-in, a quiet statement of solidarity. I'm here. I'm ready. Izuku tapped out a quick reply. Thank you, Todoroki. Data received. Your efficiency is, as always, appreciated. Midori out. He felt a measure of calm settle over him. He had a good crew. The best. Ida, Uraraka, Todoroki, even Bakugo. They were the finest officers humanity had ever produced. They were the reason he could bear the weight. They were the reason he had to. He stood up, rolling his shoulders, and made his way back to the bridge. The quiet patrol could continue, but he would watch over it. His place was in the command chair, looking out at the endless, beautiful, dangerous night. As he stepped back onto the bridge, the quiet efficiency of the night crew greeted him. He gave a nod to the officer on deck and was about to resume his post at the viewscreen when it happened. It wasn't a loud alarm. It was something far more insidious. A single, piercing note that cut through the ship's ambient noise, a frequency designed to bypass all non-essential audio and drill directly into the ears of every person on the bridge. The new communications officer, a young ensign with wide, terrified eyes, slammed his hands over his headset. Commander, I'm getting something. It's not hegemony, it's old code, EDF encryption, but it's corrupted, degraded. Uraraka, who had been about to enter the turbolift, spun around and sprinted back to her station, her previous fatigue forgotten. She gently but firmly shouldered the ensign aside, her fingers flying across the holographic console, patching it through the main speakers. I'll try to clean it up. The single note ceased, replaced by a wall of screeching static. It was the sound of a signal that had traveled an impossible distance, torn apart by solar winds and radiation. But beneath the noise, there was something else. A voice. Pleading. 80, any EDF vessel, this is... Station, overrun, there. The static warped, and for a terrifying second, the voice was lost, replaced by a sound that made the blood run cold. It was a chorus of screams, a harmony of pure, undiluted terror. Ida was already at his station, his fingers a blur. Signal origin is unstable, but I'm triangulating. Commander, the coordinates, they don't make sense. It's coming from Sector 7, deep within our territory. Izuku's eyes were locked on the speaker, his knuckles turning white where he gripped the railing. He recognized the sector. It was supposed to be one of the safest in this quadrant. Uraraka, her face pale, managed to isolate another fragment of the transmission. The screaming faded, replaced by a single, panicked voice, clearer this time. The lullaby! Oh God, the song! It's in my head, the harvester is... Then, another sound emerged from the static. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, chittering, clicking sound, like a billion insects skittering over metal. The sound of the hegemony. The signal cut out. Not into static, but into a dead, horrifying silence. A silence far more profound and terrifying than the quiet of the void. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound on the bridge was the frantic, panicked breathing of the junior officers. Izuku broke the paralysis. His voice was calm, sharp, and utterly devoid of the analytical mutter that usually defined him. This was the voice of a commander. Ochako, can you get anything else from that signal? She shook her head, her hands still trembling slightly over her console. No, sir. The carrier wave just stopped. It's gone. Tenya, Izuku said, turning to his first officer. Cross-reference the signal's point of origin with the EDF Deep Space Registry. What's in that sector? Ida didn't even need to consult his main screen. His mind was already there. Sector 7 contains only one active installation of note, Commander. A deep space biological research outpost. Code name, Dagoba Station. The name hit Izuku like a physical blow. Dagoba. A place of learning. A place of refuge. The name of the very station where Admiral Yagi had spent his final years, mentoring him away from the prying eyes of the Central Command. The station was supposed to be a secret, a ghost in the system. It held some of the EDF's most vital research on hegemony biology, and some of its most painful secrets. The quiet of their patrol had been a lie. The stillness of the void had been a hunter's crouch. Bakugo's voice exploded over the comms, no static, no filter, patched directly to the bridge by an alert comms tech. Deku! What the hell was that? My entire squadron's sensors lit up like a damn firework. Talk to me. Izuku stood before the main view screen, the starlight glinting in his hardened eyes. The reflection showed a boy no longer. It showed a weapon, forged and sharpened. He felt the hum of one for all surge within him, not with frantic energy, but with a cold, clear, absolute certainty. The vestiges were silent, watching, waiting. He tapped the comlink on his chair's armrest, his voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument, an order that would echo through the entire Third Fleet and shatter the deceptive peace. Ida, plot a course for Dagoba Station. Maximum speed. Uraraka, open a Priority 1, encrypted channel to Admiral Aizawa. Inform him we are responding to a distress call and are engaging potential hostiles. He paused, his gaze sweeping over his bridge crew, their fearful faces now filled with a dawning resolve, reflecting his own. Bakugo, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense command. Recall your wing to the flagship. Refuel, rearm, and prepare for immediate combat deployment. The war had found them in the quiet. And Commander Izuku Midoriya was about to answer with a storm. The UA high no longer drifted, it sliced. The gentle, ambient hum of the bridge had been replaced by the deep, resonant thrum of the main drive core operating at 110% of its recommended capacity. Outside the view screen, the distant stars were no longer sharp points of light, but elongated streaks of white and blue, the universe itself seeming to stretch and warp around their desperate trajectory. Every deck plate vibrated with a controlled, furious energy, a physical manifestation of the urgency that had gripped every soul on board. They were a silver arrow loosed into the heart of their own territory, a territory that had suddenly become hostile and unknown. On the bridge, the tense quiet of the patrol had been shattered and replaced by the focused, high-strung silence of professionals preparing for the worst. Every officer was at their station, their movements economical and precise. The air crackled with unspoken tension. At the center of it all, Commander Izuku Midoriya stood before the main holotable, a circular dais that now projected a swirling, three-dimensional map of Sector 7. A single, blinking red icon marked the last known coordinates of Dagobah Station. It pulsed like a dying heartbeat in the simulated darkness. Channel open to Fleet Command, Commander, Uraraka announced, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. Admiral Aizawa is standing by. On screen, Izuku ordered, his voice a low baritone that cut through the bridge's tension. The main view screen shimmered, the star-streaked void dissolving into a grainy, flickering image. The connection was being maintained across light years through a quantum entanglement comm, but the sheer speed of their travel introduced interference. The image resolved, revealing a man who looked as though he were carved from granite and exhaustion. Admiral Shota Aizawa's face was a roadmap of past battles, lined with fatigue and a permanent, weary cynicism. A thin, white scar cut diagonally under his right eye, a memento from a hegemony ambush years ago. His long, black hair was pulled back from his face, and his signature capture weapon, now a high-tensile data link and neural interface cable, was draped loosely around his neck like a tired scarf. He stood in the dim, Spartan confines of the EDF command center on Earth, a place colloquially known as the Underground. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice was gravelly, devoid of pleasantries. The hologram fizzled slightly, making him look even more like a ghost. Report. And make it fast. Your unscheduled high warp transit is causing a cascade of scheduling conflicts across the entire sector. Admiral, Izuku began, his posture straightening instinctively. At 22:47 ship time, we received a fragmented distress call on a degraded EDF frequency. We have triangulated the source to Dagobah Station. Aizawa's eyes, already dark, seemed to sink further into his skull. The flicker of surprise was almost imperceptible, but Izuku, who had studied under the man for years, saw it. Dagobah Station has been officially dark for 3 years, Commander. It's a ghost on the star charts. What did the message say? It was heavily corrupted, sir. We heard screams. We heard mention of a lullaby and a harvester. Then, we heard hegemony chittering before the signal was terminated. For a long moment, Aizawa said nothing. The only sound was the crackle and pop of the unstable connection. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously low. A harvester. So, they've finally deployed one in our territory, sir? The term is not in our tactical database, Ida interjected, his duty to protocol overriding the tension of the moment. Aizawa's gaze shifted to Ida, his expression grim. That's because the information is classified above your rank, First Officer. The Harvester is a theoretical ship class extrapolated from fragmented intel gathered by the island's sector scouts. A biodreadnought designed not just to fight, but to drain. We didn't know if it was real. It appears we were wrong. The Admiral's eyes bored back into Izuku's. Dagobah Station holds all of our primary research on the hegemony's psychic biology, including our only theoretical countermeasures for their hive mind signals. If they capture that data, they won't just know our tactics, they'll know how we think. They could predict our every move. The loss of that research would set us back a decade. Izuku's blood ran cold. The stakes had just escalated from a potential tragedy to an existential threat. And the crews, sir? The science teams? Aizawa's expression was bleak. The mission objective is the data, Commander. Your orders are as follows. 1. Ascertain the status of Dagobah Station. 2. Rescue any and all survivors if possible. 3. Secure or destroy all research data pertaining to hegemony biology. That third objective is your absolute priority. I don't care if you have to vent the station's core and turn it into a miniature sun. That data cannot fall into their hands. Am I clear? The brutal calculus of command. Data over people. The cold, hard logic of war that Izuku still struggled with every single day. He swallowed the bitter taste in his mouth. Crystal clear, Admiral. This is a trap, Midoriya, Aizawa stated, his voice a flat certainty. The hegemony don't leave witnesses. The distress call was bait. They left a line in the water, and you're the one swimming toward it. They're likely waiting for a capital ship to respond. They're waiting for you. I'm aware of the possibility, sir. Good, Aizawa grunted. Then don't be a fool. You have command of the Third Fleet. Use it. But know this, command is not sending reinforcements. The other fleets are holding the line at the terminus sector. You are on your own out there. Get the data, Midoriya. And try not to get your entire fleet killed in the process. The hologram crackled violently and dissolved into static, leaving Izuku standing in the renewed silence of his bridge, the weight of his orders pressing down on him like a physical force. He was alone. His fleet, his command, was all that stood between the hegemony and the secrets that could cripple Earth's entire defense strategy. He took a single, deep breath, pushing his own fear down, compacting it into a hard, cold ball of resolve in his gut. He turned to the holotable, his mind already racing, processing the new variables. A harvester. A trap. A priority one objective. Ida, he said, his voice ringing with newfound purpose. Bring up the fleet deployment chart. Uraraka, establish secure, closed-channel holographic links to Wing Commander Bakugo and Captain Todoroki. I want them on this bridge, now. Aye, Commander, they responded in unison. The main holotable shimmered again. The map of Sector 7 shrank, replaced by a tactical grid showing the real-time positions of the Third Fleet, a collection of cruisers, frigates, and support ships trailing in the UA-High's warp shadow. A few seconds later, two life-sized figures flickered into existence on opposite sides of the table. To his left stood the avatar of Katsuki Bakugo. Even as a projection of light and data, he was a kinetic storm. He was already in his flight suit, the black and orange material hugging his powerful frame. He wasn't standing still. He bounced on the balls of his feet, his hands clenching and unclenching as if he could already feel the controls of his starfighter, the King Explosion Murder. His holographic image crackled with a faint red energy, a digital representation of his explosive power. To his right was the stark contrast of Captain Shoto Todoroki. His avatar was perfectly still, his posture immaculate in the white and blue uniform of his command. His heterochromatic eyes, one cool gray, the other a piercing turquoise, were fixed on Izuku, analyzing, processing. The left side of his projection seemed to give off a faint, frosty vapor, while the right shimmered with latent heat. He was a portrait of controlled, immense power. What's the situation, Deku? Bakugo growled, wasting no time on pleasantries. My pilots are suited up and my cannons are hot. You better not have called me in here for another one of your damn simulation drills. This is not a drill, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice level. He gestured to the blinking red icon of Dagobah Station at the center of the table. At 2247, we received a distress call from this research station. The signal was cut, but not before we confirmed hegemony presence. Todoroki's gaze sharpened. The station is deep in our territory. A frontal assault would have been detected. This is an infiltration. A targeted strike. Worse, Izuku continued, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. Fleet Command believes the distress call is bait for a trap, likely targeting a capital-class response. They've also confirmed the presence of a new hegemony ship class, codenamed Harvester, purpose unknown but suspected to be a high-threat psychic weapon. Bakugo let out a sharp, feral grin. A trap? New ship? Sounds like a party. Just tell me where to shoot. Your enthusiasm is noted, Wing Commander, Izuku said, his tone turning formal, the commander taking precedence over the childhood rival. But your objective is not to shoot. Not at first. He expanded the tactical map, zooming in on the station. Kaken, your Cerberus wing is our scalpel. You're faster, more agile, and have a smaller energy signature than anything else in this fleet. When we drop out of warp, you are to launch immediately. You will perform a high-speed reconnaissance sweep of the system. Your priority is information. I want to know the size of the hegemony force, their disposition, and if you can identify this harvester vessel. I want to know what we're walking into before we commit the fleet. No reckless charges. No unauthorized engagement unless you are fired upon. Is that understood? Bakugo's grin tightened, the order to hold back clearly chafing him. But he saw the logic. He saw his role. He gave a sharp, jerky nod. Fine. I'll be your damn eyes and ears. But if those bugs so much as look at me funny, I'm turning them into slag. That's all I ask, Izuku said, then turned his attention to the silent captain. Todoroki. You are the shield and the hammer. He altered the projection, highlighting a dense field of icy debris and asteroids orbiting the gas giant Dagobah station orbited. The Endeavor's legacy is the only ship in the fleet that can create large-scale environmental defenses on the fly. When we arrive, you will position your dreadnought here, on the edge of the debris field. You will remain on low power, using the ice chunks as cover. If this is a trap and the hegemony springs it, your first priority is defense. Use your cryogenerators to flash freeze asteroids, create defensive walls, obscure their targeting solutions. Lock down the battlefield. Your second priority, Izuku's eyes hardened, is to have your plasma lances fully charged. If Bakugo finds a target, I need you to be ready to punch a hole through it from half a system away. Todoroki processed the orders for a moment, his gaze shifting from the map to Izuku. He gave a single, curt nod. Logical. My crew will be ready. We will provide the control and the firepower. Good, Izuku said, feeling a sliver of the weight on his shoulders being shared. The rest of the fleet will hold back with the Uahi until we have a clear picture of the battlefield. We walk into this with our eyes open. Dismissed. The two holograms flickered and vanished, leaving Izuku alone at the table once more. Ida stepped forward, his expression one of crisp approval. Excellent orders, Commander. Clear, concise, and utilizing each asset to its maximum potential. Izuku gave a weary nod, his mind already jumping ahead to the thousand things that could go wrong. He left the bridge, heading for the momentary solitude of his quarters before they arrived at the station. The ship's thrumming was a constant, pulsing reminder. Time was running out. His quarters were a sanctuary of quiet, a small pocket of stillness in the heart of the roaring vessel. He bypassed his cot and went straight to his desk, activating the datapad. The screen lit up, displaying not a novel or a personal log, but a series of complex documents filled with diagrams, energy readings, and tactical analyses. They were his old hero analysis for the future notebooks, digitized and repurposed for a deadlier game. His fingers flew across the screen, pulling up every file he had on the hegemony. Battle reports, speculative biology, intercept logs. His muttering, absent on the bridge, returned in a frantic, desperate whisper. They always favor swarm tactics. Overwhelming numbers to induce shock and awe, but a targeted strike this deep in our territory is different. It implies stealth, precision, a new doctrine. The lullaby, a psychic signal. Does it induce fear? Confusion? Pacification? If it affects the whole crew, command structure could collapse in seconds. The harvester, if it drains energy, is it targeting ship reactors or something else? He scrolled through a report from a skirmish near the Kepler border, his eyes catching a note he'd made in the margin months ago. Unexplained energy fluctuations recorded from hegemony vessels post-engagement. Correlates with EDF casualty numbers, not with ordnance expenditure. Further analysis required. He'd never figured it out. It was a loose thread, a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. Now, with Aizawa's words echoing in his mind, a horrifying possibility began to form. What if they weren't just draining ships? The thought was so jarring it threw him out of his analytical spiral. The weight on his shoulders felt heavier than ever, the responsibility immense. And with that pressure the old, familiar ghosts of doubt began to stir. He leaned back, the chair groaning in protest, and squeezed his eyes shut. In the darkness, a memory surfaced, as vivid and painful as the day it happened. The zero-gravity training room of the academy. The faint scent of ozone and recycled air. He was 18, a cadet who had just been told he would be fast-tracked to command, a decision that had sent shockwaves through the military establishment. And before him floated the man who had made it possible. Tashinori Yagi, All Might, was a shadow of his former self, his gaunt frame floating in the zero-G chamber, tethered only by a thin safety line. His eyes, however, burned with the intensity of a dying star. You have a brilliant mind, young Midoriya. Tashinori had said, his voice thin but resonant in the quiet room. You see possibilities where others see only problems. That is why you were chosen for command, but a mind, no matter how brilliant, is not enough to lead humanity through the dark. He had held out a single, glowing strand of his hair. It pulsed with a soft, golden light, a stark contrast to the sterile, gray environment. This power, one for all, is a crucible. It will take your spirit, your will, your very soul, and forge it into a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of leadership. It will grant you stamina beyond any other human, the ability to process tactical information at impossible speeds, to feel the ebb and flow of a battle as if it were your own heartbeat. It will make you more. Tashinori's face grew impossibly grim. But it comes with a cost. It is a burden, my boy. A terrible, lonely burden. It will feel like you have the strength of a god, but the heart of a man, and the two will forever be at war within you. When you send pilots to their deaths on a calculated risk, your heart will scream, but this power will demand you hold the line. It will demand you remain the pillar. He pushed the strand of hair toward Izuku, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The fleet cannot see you falter. They cannot see you break under the strain. In my time, my smile was the symbol that everything was all right. For you, Commander Midoriya, your unwavering resolve must be that symbol. A commander who shows weakness shatters the morale of his entire fleet. So you will take their fear, their doubt, their pain, and you will carry it for them. You will carry it, and you will never let it show. That is the true meaning of one for all in this age. That is the Deku directive. Do you accept? Izuku's breath hitched in his chest, the memory as sharp as a shard of glass. He had accepted. Of course he had. But now, hurtling towards a trap, towards an unknown enemy, he felt the terrible weight of that promise. He felt the war between the heart of the boy who wanted to save everyone and the mind of the commander who knew he couldn't. He pressed the heel of his hand to his chest, feeling the quiet, immense power thrumming beneath. Was he a worthy pillar? Or was he just a fraud, a quirkless boy playing with a power he could never truly master, about to lead thousands to their deaths? A soft chime at his door startled him from his spiraling thoughts. Come in, he managed to say, his voice hoarse. The door slid open with a hiss, and Ochako Uraraka stepped inside, holding a single, steaming mug. She wasn't in her formal uniform anymore, but in a comfortable gray EDF-issue ship suit. Her expression was soft, full of a concern that cut through his commander's armor. The galley just brewed a fresh pot of that earth-imported tea she said, her voice gentle. She set the mug down on the corner of his desk, careful not to disturb his scattered data files. Thought you could use some. He looked from her face to the mug, the simple, human gesture feeling monumental. Thank you, Ochako. You didn't have to. I know. She didn't leave. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, her warm brown eyes studying him. The whole ship can feel it, you know. The tension. It's like the deck plates themselves are holding their breath. And we all know that when the ship feels it, you're feeling it 10 times worse. He tried to formulate a commander's response, something reassuring and confident, but the words died in his throat. The mask was too heavy to lift. She seemed to understand. You don't have to carry it all alone, she said softly, her words an uncanny echo of his own fears. That's why you have us. Tenya keeps the ship running like a clock so you can focus on the big picture. Bakugo is out there ready to blow up anything that threatens us. Todoroki is waiting to turn the void itself into a fortress for us. The bridge crew, we trust you, Izuku. Implicitly. We're your fleet. Let us help you carry the weight. Her use of his first name was a rare, deliberate choice. It was not the chief communications officer speaking to the commander. It was Ochako speaking to Izuku. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just a subordinate, but a friend. He saw the unwavering belief in her eyes, a belief that he struggled to find in himself. Her simple act of faith was a lifeline. It didn't banish the fear or the doubt, but it kept them from consuming him. It reminded him that the pillar Tashinori spoke of didn't have to stand alone. It was supported by the bedrock of a loyal, capable, and caring crew. A small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time since the distress call had come in. He reached out and picked up the mug. The warmth spread through his cold fingers. Thank you, Ochako, he said again, and this time, the words were full. I needed that. She returned his smile, a bright, reassuring thing. Any time, Commander. Now drink your tea. We drop out of warp in 10 minutes. She slipped out, the door hissing shut behind her, leaving him once again in the quiet of his room. He took a sip of the tea. It was hot, bitter, and grounding. The frantic muttering had ceased. The ghosts of his doubt had receded. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was manageable now. He stood, placed the mug on his desk, and walked to the small closet, pulling out his formal commander's jacket. He shrugged it on, the familiar weight settling on his shoulders. It felt a little lighter than before. 10 minutes. He was no longer just the boy with a borrowed power. He was no longer just the analyst lost in his theories. He was their commander. And he was ready. The transition was a physical violation. One moment, the UA was a phantom arrow in the non-space of warp, the universe a smear of abstract light. The next, reality reasserted itself with the force of a tidal wave. A deep, bone-jarring shudder ran through the entire length of the flagship as its warp field collapsed, the star streaks on the viewscreen snapping back into a billion pinpricks of icy, indifferent light. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and filled with a dreadful anticipation. They had arrived. Before them, filling the viewscreen, hung Dagobah Prime. It was a colossal gas giant, a maelstrom of swirling methane and ammonia clouds in shades of sickly green and muddy brown, scarred by continent-sized lightning storms that flickered silently in its upper atmosphere. It was a beautiful, terrible behemoth, and orbiting it, like a mote of dust caught in the gravity of a god, was their destination, Dagobah Station. It was a Spindle-class research facility, a design familiar to every officer on the bridge, a long central spine connecting a spherical command module at one end and a wide, circular habitation ring at the other. But something was profoundly wrong. A healthy station was a creature of light and energy. It would be blazing with running lights, dotted with the friendly glow of viewports, and broadcasting a constant stream of telemetry and communications. This station was a corpse. It was dark, inert, and tumbling slowly, end over end, in a lazy, pathetic pirouette. No lights. No signals. Not even a flicker of residual power. It looked like a discarded toy, ancient and forgotten. The only illumination came from the eerie, reflected glow of the gas giant below, which painted one side of the station in a ghastly green pallor, while the other remained cloaked in impenetrable shadow. My God, a junior ensign at a science station whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Commander Izuku Midoriya's eyes narrowed, his mind a frantic engine of analysis already discarding a dozen possibilities. Ida report. First Officer Tenya Ida was a pillar of calm efficiency in the face of the unnerving sight. His fingers moved with practiced speed over his console. Structural integrity is at 98%, Commander. No signs of weapons fire, no hull breaches, no explosive decompression. Power readings are flatlined across the board. The primary reactor is offline. Life support, sir, it's critical. Oxygen levels in the habitation ring are below 5%. Minimal atmospheric pressure. What's left of the internal heat is radiating away into the void. Every word was a nail in the coffin of hope. Powerless. Airless. Cold. Ochako? Izuku's voice was tight. Uraraka Station was a hub of silent activity. Her sensor drones, launched the instant they dropped from warp, were already swarming the station like a cloud of silver gnats. On her screen, a dozen different spectral analyses were running simultaneously. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed in concentration. No energy signatures, Commander. Nothing. Not even the emergency backups are kicking in. I'm running a full-spectrum bioscan, but it's difficult. There's a strange, low-level energy field blanketing the station. It's not hegemony in origin, more like residual radiation. It's interfering with the finer readings. She bit her lip. I'm not getting any confirmed life signs, sir. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Still, Izuku clung to the shreds of his mandate. Rescue any and all survivors, if possible. A familiar, crackling voice filled the bridge comms, laced with a predatory tension. Bridge, Cerberus 1. I have eyes on the target. The hell happened here? It looks like they just turned off the lights and went home. It's creepy. Way too damn quiet. Bakugo Starfighter, the King Explosion Murder, was a sleek, angular predator hanging in space a few thousand meters off the station's command sphere. His squadron fanned out behind him in a perfect attack formation. Maintain your position, Cerberus 1, Izuku ordered, his gaze still locked on the dead station. Your reconnaissance is now a security overwatch. Report any energy fluctuations, no matter how small. Copy that, Bridge. Let me know if you want me to knock. I can knock real loud, Bakugo replied, a clear undercurrent of frustration in his tone. He was a weapon that yearned to be fired, and his silent vigil was a unique form of torture for him. Another voice, cool and measured, joined the comms. Commander, this is the Endeavor's legacy. We are in position on the far side of the debris field. Power is minimal, and our thermal signature is masked by the ice asteroids. My lances are charged. We are ready. Acknowledged, Captain Todoroki, Izuku said. The shield and the hammer were in place. It was time to send in the search party. Commander, Ida said, stepping closer. Given the atmospheric conditions and the unknown nature of the energy field, sending in an away team is a significant risk. It's a risk we have to take, Izuku countered, his voice firm. He turned to the security chief station. Chief Kirishima, report to the main briefing room. Prepare your team for a boarding action. Full environmental suits, radiation shielding, and Class 4 biohazard filters. I want your best people. A cheerful, resolute voice responded instantly. You got it, Commander. We'll be ready in 5. Security Chief Eijiro Kirishima was a rock. His quirk, hardening, which allowed him to make his body nigh invulnerable, was a perfect metaphor for his personality. He was tough, reliable, and possessed a spirit so bright and unshakable it could boost the morale of an entire platoon just by his presence. If anyone could walk into that tomb and keep their nerve, it was him. In the briefing room, a sterile white hexagon deep within the ship, Kirishima and his 5-person team stood at attention. They were already encased in heavy, armored EV suits, their helmets held under their arms. Izuku's holographic form stood before them, a towering, semi-transparent figure of light. Chief, Izuku began, his voice echoing slightly in the small room. Your mission is twofold. First, search for survivors. We are operating under the assumption that there may be sealed sections or emergency shelters still viable, however unlikely. Second, you are to proceed to the station's central computer in the command module and retrieve the primary data core. That core contains the research Admiral Aizawa designated as Priority 1. Understood, Sir, Kirishima said, his own voice muffled slightly by the room's acoustics. His signature sharp-toothed grin was visible even in the dim light. We'll find what you're looking for. You can count on us. Izuku's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. I am Eijiro. Be careful. The energy field Uraraka detected could be hazardous. If any of your team's biosensors show anomalous readings, you pull out immediately. No arguments. Loud and clear, Commander. We won't let you down. Kirishima pulled his helmet on, the polarized visor sliding down with a hiss, hiding his reassuring smile. Let's move out, team. The shuttle, a small, nimble craft named the Fat Gum, detached from the UA-High's main hangar bay with a puff of maneuvering thrusters. It crossed the void between the flagship and the station, its lights cutting lonely paths through the oppressive darkness. On the bridge, Izuku watched its progress on the main view screen, a knot of tension tightening in his stomach. He was sending them into the mouth of the beast, and he had no idea what teeth it possessed. The shuttle docked at an emergency airlock on the habitation ring with a dull, metallic clang that seemed to echo in the silence. For several minutes, the bridge crew waited with bated breath as Kirishima's team cycled the airlock and established a hard seal. Then, Kirishima's voice, filtered through his suit's calm, crackled to life. Bridge, this is Red Riot. We are in. Airlock seal is stable. We're proceeding into the station. Copy that, Red Riot, Izuku replied, using Kirishima's chosen call sign. Report your findings. The view on the secondary screen switched to a series of helmet cams, offering a jittery, first-person perspective of the station's interior. The sight was even more unsettling from the inside. The corridor was dark, lit only by the powerful beams of the team's shoulder-mounted flashlights. Emergency lighting panels were shattered on the floor. Loose datapads and pieces of equipment drifted lazily in the near-zero gravity, ghostly reminders of the people who had once walked these halls. "It's freezing in here," one of the team members, a tech specialist named Jiro, muttered. "And do you guys smell that?" "Yeah," Kirishima's voice confirmed, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Sweet. Like old flowers." Izuku felt a prickle of unease. A strange smell was an unquantifiable, dangerous variable. He made a mental note. The team moved with practiced, deliberate motions, their magnetic boots clanking against the deck plating. They swept through the habitation block first. Crew quarters were left open, their contents in disarray. The mess hall was a scene of chaos frozen in time. Tables were overturned, and trays of synthetic nutrient paste were stuck to the ceiling, their contents long since freeze-dried. There were signs of panic everywhere, but there were no bodies. "Bridge, it's like the place was evacuated in a hurry," Kirishima reported, his voice laced with confusion. "But there's no record of any shuttles launching. The hangar bay is full. Proceed to the main science labs, Chief," Izuku ordered, his own confusion mounting. The mystery was deepening with every step they took. The science labs were located in the central spine of the station. As the team floated through the long, cylindrical corridor, they passed by large observation windows that looked out onto the swirling face of Dagobah Prime. The green, stormy light cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to dance just at the edge of their vision. The sense of being watched was palpable. They reached the sealed blast door of the primary bioresearch lab. Kirishima placed a hand on the console. "Accessing the door now." "It's unlocked." The massive door slid open with a low groan of protesting metal, revealing the cavernous, circular room beyond. And it was there they found them. The helmet cams swept across the room, and a collective gasp went through the bridge of the UA High. Izuku felt the air leave his lungs in a sharp, cold rush. The science team was all there. 20 men and women, frozen in their final moments. Some were slumped over consoles, others were floating in the center of the room, their arms outstretched as if reaching for something no one else could see. But it was their condition that defied all logic and instilled a primal horror in all who witnessed it. They weren't wounded. There was no blood, no signs of violence. They were empty. Each body was a desiccated husk, a horrifyingly preserved shell of a human being. Their skin was pulled taut over their skeletons, wrinkled and gray like ancient parchment. Their cheeks were sunken, their lips peeled back in silent screams, revealing teeth that seemed too large for their shrunken heads. And their eyes were wide open, staring into the void with an expression of stark, soul-shattering terror that had outlasted life itself. They looked like mummies that had been flash-dried in a vacuum, every drop of moisture, every ounce of life, seemingly siphoned out of them. "Commander, what in God's name happened to them?" Kirishima's voice was a choked whisper, his usual bravado completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. Izuku stared at the screen, his mind racing, connecting the dots. The Harvester. A ship designed not to fight, but to drain. The unexplained energy fluctuations from the Kepler report. The desiccated bodies. It wasn't their ships the hegemony were draining. It was their people. "Red Riot," Izuku said, his voice a low, grim command, forcing himself to stay focused. "Check the terminals. Find the logs. Find anything that explains this. Now." Shaken, the team complied. Jiro, the tech specialist, floated over to the head researcher's console. The screen was still active, frozen on a corrupted file. Her gloved fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, bypassing security lockouts. "I'm in," she said, her voice trembling. "Accessing the final audio and text logs. They're heavily corrupted, but I'm piecing some of it together." Playing audio log fragment 1. A distorted voice, filled with static and panic, filled the calm channel. "Can't block it out. A low hum at first, now it's a song. A damn lullaby. Some of the junior researchers, they say it's beautiful. They've started humming it." Text log, timestamped 2 hours later, Jiro narrated. The song isn't just in our ears anymore. It's in our heads. It's promising rest. An end to struggle. Dr. Hatsam's cousin from the engineering department just walked into the atmospheric recycler. He was smiling. Said he was going to sleep. We had to seal the section. Final audio log, Jiro whispered, her own voice barely audible. It's from the station director. The file is tagged Harvester's Lament. The voice that came through was ragged, torn apart by sobs and sheer terror. It's here! Oh God, it's right outside, the big one, the one from the nightmares. It's not attacking, it's just singing. And it's so hungry, it's drinking us, drinking the starlight from our souls. It's so cold. The voice cut out, replaced by the same hideous, chittering sound from the original distress call, followed by a final, agonized scream that was abruptly silenced. On the bridge, a horrified silence reigned. Uraraka had her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Ida stood frozen, his perfect posture for once forgotten. This wasn't war. This was something else. Something ancient and predatory. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The hegemony were not soldiers. They were cosmic vampires. Jiro, he said, his voice hard as diamond. The research. Where is the main data core? The station's central computer, she replied, her composure slowly returning. It's in the command module, at the opposite end of the station's spine. Go, Izuku commanded Kirishima. Get that core. That is now your only objective. Then you are getting out of there. Copy, Bridge. On our way, Kirishima responded, his voice regaining a sliver of its usual resolve. He was a professional, and he had his orders. He rallied his team, and they moved out of the lab of horrors, leaving the silent, staring bodies behind. They traversed the long central spine, the journey feeling infinitely longer and more menacing than before. Every shadow seemed to hold a chittering monster. Every flicker of light from Dagobah Prime seemed like a hungry eye watching them. Finally, they reached the command module. It was a sphere-shaped room, dominated by a large, cylindrical column in the center, the station's main computer core. Bridge, we've reached the core, Kirishima reported, his voice tight with tension. Jiro is accessing the primary data port now. We should have the core released in 2 minutes. On the bridge, a collective sigh of relief started to form. They had the objective in their sights. Jiro plugged her interface cable into the port. Her console lit up. She gasped. Commander, something's wrong. There's a high-energy power source building inside the core. It's not from the station's reactor. It's hegemony tech. And there's a quantum timer. Izuku's blood turned to ice. A bomb. It's not just a bomb, sir, she said, her voice rising in panic. It's a quantum cascade device. The yield, my God, the yield is enough to vaporize this entire station and anything within a 10,000-kilometer radius. It's a fleet killer. And it's set to detonate in 90 seconds. The second I tried to access the core, it armed the trigger. Kirishima's voice was a desperate roar over the comms. It's a trap. Commander, the whole station is the damn bait. At that exact, horrifying moment, Uraraka screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a raw, primal sound of terror that ripped through the professional calm of the bridge. She tore her headset off, her eyes wide and fixed on her sensor screen, which had turned from a calm, orderly grid into a nightmare of blazing red. Commander! She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the main view screen. Massive energy signatures. All around US. They were using the station's energy field to mask themselves. They're decloaking. Izuku's head snapped toward the view screen. The space around the dead station began to shimmer, to distort, like the air above a burning fire. The fabric of reality itself seemed to tear open, and from those tears, the hegemony fleet emerged. They didn't appear with a flash of light or a crack of energy. They simply coalesced, phasing into existence like ghosts becoming solid. They were not ships of metal and circuits, but monstrous amalgams of dark, chitinous plating and pulsating, veined organic matter. They were insects the size of mountains, their forms jagged and asymmetrical, an affront to every principle of human engineering. Dozens of them. Cruisers, frigates, swarms of smaller fighter drones. They surrounded the Third Fleet in a perfect, inescapable sphere, and then, from the shadow of the gas giant itself, the true nightmare revealed itself. It was colossal, easily 5 times the size of the UA high. It was bulbous and fleshy, more creature than vessel, a sickening lattice of black chitin over a pulsating, bioluminescent purple core. At its front was a vast, circular maw, an aperture that seemed to open and close like a hungry mouth, drawing in the stellar dust around it. It radiated an aura of pure, malevolent hunger that could be felt even across the vacuum of space. The Harvester. On the bridge's tactical display, Izuku's lone command ship and its small escort were suddenly drowning in a sea of red enemy icons. The silence of the void was shattered. The trap had been sprung. The jaws had closed. The universe held its breath for 1.7 seconds. It was the span of a single, horrified heartbeat on the bridge of the UA High. One moment, they were a rescue mission on the edge of a mystery. The next, they were the last candle in a hurricane, surrounded by a fleet of nightmares materialized from the void. The view screen, once a window onto a quiet expanse, was now a claustrophobic cage, walled in by the grotesque, organic architecture of the chitinous hegemony. Then, the universe screamed. It began not as a sound, but as a feeling. A deep, resonant thrum that bypassed the ship's hull and vibrated directly in the bones of every crew member. It was a subsonic wave of pure dread, a bass note of cosmic horror that made teeth ache and vision swim. And then came the song. Uraraka was the first to truly hear it. As the fleet's chief sensory officer, her nervous system was tied into the ship's comms network more intimately than anyone's. The lullaby from the dead station's log was not a lullaby. It was a psychic battle hymn. It flooded the comms channels, not as audio, but as a parasitic data stream, a mimetic virus that infected the brain. It was a chorus of whispers that promised oblivion, a melody of despair that clawed at the edges of sanity. It spoke of the futility of struggle, the sweetness of surrender, the cold, quiet peace of the void. No, Uraraka gasped, clutching her head, her face ashen. Get it out of my head. Across the bridge, the effect was instantaneous and devastating. A young ensign at the navigation console slumped in his chair, his eyes wide and vacant, a thin trickle of blood weeping from his nose. Another officer began to weep openly, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't operate his controls. The crisp, professional atmosphere shattered into 1,000 pieces of raw, unfiltered panic. The psalm was a psychic plague, and it was spreading. Izuku felt it too. It was a cold, oily tendril slithering into his mind, whispering his deepest fears. You're not a commander. You're a fraud. A quirkless boy playing with a power you don't deserve. You led them all here to die. Just let go. It will be so much easier to just let go. The vestiges of One for All roared to life within him. It was not a conscious act, but a primal, instinctual defense. A wall of crackling green energy, the collected willpower of 8 generations, slammed down in his mind, severing the psychic tendril. The whispers vanished, replaced by a blinding headache and the frantic thumping of his own heart. The power had protected him, but the assault gave him a terrifying clarity on the nature of the weapon they faced. He slammed his fist down on the armrest of his command chair, the sharp impact sending a jolt of pain up his arm that cut through the psychic fog. His voice, amplified by the bridge's internal address system, was a thunderclap that shook the crew from their stupor. All hands. Battle stations. Ida, engage tactical override. Slave all non-essential systems to your command console. Tenya Ida, his face a mask of supreme concentration, was fighting the psychic assault with the sheer, brute force logic of his own mind. His quirk, which let him process data at inhuman speeds, was analyzing the psychic wave as just another data stream, breaking it down, categorizing its patterns, and finding the flaws in its logic. Sweat beaded on his brow, his jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might crack, but his hands were a blur on his console. Tactical override engaged, Commander. He bit out, his voice strained. I am purging the internal comms network of the parasitic signal, and rerouting essential commands through shielded hard lines. The bridge is secure, but the rest of the ship, morale is plummeting. Ochako! Izuku roared, his attention snapping to his communications chief. She was on her knees shaking, but her eyes were filled with a furious, desperate light. The signal is a wave. It has a frequency. Find it. Create a counterfrequency. Anything. Flood the comms with white noise if you have to, just give them something else to listen to. The order galvanized her. It gave her a problem to solve, a target to fight. A feedback loop. She muttered, scrambling back into her chair. Her quirk flared to life. The small sensor drones that floated around her station began to glow, their movements becoming frantic and impossibly precise as she manipulated them with her power, turning the entire fleet's sensor array into a makeshift sonic weapon. I can use the main comms dish to generate a counter-resonance. It won't block the signal, but it might disrupt it, buying us seconds at best. Seconds are all I need. Izuku yelled, turning his attention to the tactical holotable. The red icons of the hegemony fleet were already moving, tightening the net. Weapons, target the lead cruisers. Fire at will. Give them hell. The UA shuddered as its dorsal particle cannons and missile batteries unleashed a salvo of brilliant, white-hot energy. Lances of light and swarms of plasma torpedoes tore across the void, impacting on the chitinous hulls of the closest hegemony ships. The explosions were silent, but their effects were spectacular. Chunks of black carapace and splashes of sickly purple fluid erupted from the enemy vessels, but they didn't stop. They absorbed the punishment, their movements barely faltering. It was then that the first true shots of the ambush were fired. Not from the larger ships, but from the Harvester itself. Its central maw pulsed, and it vomited forth a cloud of thousands of smaller biovessels, fighter drones that swarmed like hornets from a kicked nest. Bakugo's voice, a feral snarl of pure rage, cut through the chaos. Finally! Cerberus Wing, engage! Burn these bastards out of the sky! Forget recon, this is pest control. The 12 starfighters of Cerberus Wing, which had been holding a tight, disciplined formation, broke like a fist unclenching. Bakugo's King Explosion Murder was at the vanguard, its engines flaring with an intensity that outshone the others. His explosion quirk wasn't just a pilot's trait, it was integrated into the very fiber of his ship. He could channel his explosive energy directly into the particle cannons, turning standard energy bolts into devastating, concussive blasts that hit with the force of miniature suns. Eat this, you chittering freaks! Howitzer impact. A bolt of incandescent orange energy, visibly larger and more violent than a standard shot, erupted from his fighter and slammed into a hegemony drone. The drone didn't just explode, it vaporized, the concussive force of the blast obliterating 2 of its nearby wingmen in a sympathetic detonation. The dogfight was a maelstrom of light and death, a lethal ballet set against the backdrop of the swirling gas giant. Bakugo was a demon in the cockpit, his fighter weaving and dodging through impossible turns, leaving trails of exploding alien craft in his wake. His squadron, inspired by his ferocity, fought with a desperate courage, but they were horrifically outnumbered, a dozen sparks against a wildfire. Izuku watched the tactical display, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. The psychic attack, the overwhelming numbers, the resilience of their ships, it was all designed to induce shock and paralysis. A classic hegemony tactic, amplified to a terrifying new level. They couldn't win a battle of attrition. They had to break the enemy's strategy. They had to change the shape of the battlefield. Todoroki! He yelled into the calm now. Execute Plan Beta. Lock down the field. Acknowledged, Commander, came the icy, calm reply. Unleashing winter's wrath. From the far side of the system, hidden amongst the icy asteroids, the Endeavor's legacy came to life. Its entire hull seemed to shimmer as massive cryogenerators, powered by a fusion core tied directly to Todoroki's own quirk, spooled up to maximum capacity. A wave of absolute zero energy, visible as a ripple in spacetime, washed over the debris field. The effect was instantaneous and awe-inspiring. Dozens of asteroids, some the size of small moons, were flash-frozen. Their surfaces cracked and crazed, venting plumes of frozen gas into the void. Todoroki wasn't just cooling them, he was fundamentally changing their structure, making them brittle and hyperdense. Then, the second stage of his plan unfolded. Graviton projectors, positioned along the dreadnought's spine, fired in sequence. The frozen asteroids, now caught in powerful gravity wells, were hurled across the battlefield. It was planetary billiards on a military scale. A mountain of ice and rocks slammed into a hegemony cruiser, the sheer kinetic force buckling its organic hull and sending it tumbling end over end. Another asteroid was positioned perfectly between Bakugo's beleaguered squadron and a fresh wave of drones, providing a moving wall of cover. Todoroki was not just a captain, he was an artist, and the canvas was the cosmos. He used his quirk and his ship to sculpt the battlefield, creating barriers, obstacles, and kinetic weapons from the environment itself. The hegemony fleet, whose strategy relied on fluid, swarming attacks, was momentarily thrown into disarray. Their formations broke as they scrambled to avoid the celestial ordnance. It was the breathing room Izuku needed. But his eyes were not on the cruisers or the fighters. They were locked on the monstrous, pulsating form of the harvester. It hadn't moved. It hadn't fired a conventional weapon. It just sat there, at the heart of the battle, its psychic song the conductor's baton for this orchestra of death. And now, its central maw was beginning to glow with a sickening, purple light. Ida, analysis on the harvester, Izuku demanded. What is it doing? Massive energy buildup in the primary aperture, Commander. Ida reported, his voice tight. It's an energy type I've never seen before. It's not plasma, it's not particle-based, it's... Sir, it's targeting the Endeavor's legacy. The energy signature is locking onto Captain Todoroki's ship, of course. Todoroki's use of his quirk on such a massive scale had made his ship the brightest candle in the dark, a beacon of power that the harvester found irresistible. On the viewscreen, a tendril of purple energy lashed out from the harvester's maw, not as a beam, but as a searching, grasping whip of light. Izuku saw the next 10 seconds play out in his mind with horrifying clarity. The beam would hit. Todoroki's shields, already taxed by his cryoblast, would fail. The harvester would drain the Endeavor's legacy dry, and its crew would end up like the desiccated husks on the station. And with the fleet's heaviest hitter gone, the rest of them would be picked off one by one. He had to make a choice. A commander's choice. The kind that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. His eyes darted across the tactical map. He saw a small Tensei-class frigate, the EDF Daigoro, holding its position near a volatile, crystalline asteroid cluster he had noted when they first arrived. A cluster rich in unstable, explosive thoron gas. The calculation was instant. Brutal. Necessary. Commander Agamotto. Izuku's voice was cold iron, devoid of all emotion. Full power to your main cannon. Target the Thoron asteroid at coordinates grid Gamma 7. Fire on my mark. There was a half-second of stunned silence on the calm. The commander of the Daigoro, a veteran officer named Kenji Agamotto, responded, his voice laced with confusion. Sir, that asteroid is directly between the harvester and Captain Todoroki's position. Firing on it will. I am aware of the tactical situation, Commander. Izuku snapped. That is a direct order. Fire. Aye, Commander. Firing. A single, brilliant lance of energy shot from the small frigate. It wasn't aimed at an enemy ship, but at the glowing, crystalline asteroid. The moment the beam touched the asteroid's surface, a cataclysmic chain reaction began. The thoron gas deposits ignited, turning the asteroid into a miniature star. A wave of pure, white-hot energy and vaporized crystal erupted outwards. It was a perfectly timed, desperate gambit. The harvester's energy whip, which had been seconds from striking the Endeavor's legacy, was caught in the blast wave. The tendril of purple energy dissipated, its targeting solution shattered by the sheer force of the explosion. But the victory was paid for in blood. The Daigoro, the frigate that had fired the shot, was too close to the blast. The expanding fireball engulfed the small ship completely. Its shields flickered for less than a microsecond before they were overwhelmed. For a brief, terrible moment, the silhouette of the frigate was visible, suspended in the heart of the man-made sun. Then, it simply ceased to exist. 154 souls, vaporized in an instant. On the bridge of the Yue Hai, no one breathed. The cost of saving the dreadnought was laid bare in a silent, expanding cloud of superheated gas and metal atoms. Izuku stood rigid, his face a stony mask, but inside, a part of him fractured. He could feel it. 154 lives. He had typed their names into a command line and hit delete. He could hear their ghosts screaming in the silence. He saw their faces, men and women he'd shared meals with in the officers' mess, and he had killed them as surely as if he had pulled the trigger himself. A commander bears the weight so their soldiers don't have to. Tashinori's words were a cruel, mocking echo in his mind. He didn't have time to grieve. The hegemony fleet, momentarily stunned by the blast, was already regrouping. The Harvester, its attack thwarted, let out a psychic screech of fury that made the entire bridge crew flinch. This was their chance. Their only chance. All ships! Izuku's voice was raw, ragged, but filled with an unbreakable authority. Emergency warp jump. Coordinates Alpha Prime Niner. Through the debris field. Execute. Now, Ida's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Commander. Warping through a debris field of that density is suicide. The odds of a catastrophic collision are over 90%. Navigational protocols absolutely forbid. I am overriding protocol, Tenya. Izuku roared, his fist clenched so tight his knuckles were white. The enemy expects us to retreat into open space where they can pursue us. They will never expect to jump through solid rock and ice. It's our only way out, he was gambling. Not on luck, but on chaos. He was betting that the hegemony's rigid, hive mind tactics would be too slow to predict such a reckless, illogical, human maneuver. You're insane, Deku! Bakugo's voice screamed over the comms, a mixture of terror and exhilaration. It's the craziest damn thing I've ever heard. Cerberus Wing is away. We'll meet you on the other side. The UA and the remnants of the Third Fleet turned, their engines glowing white-hot. They didn't flee away from the battle, but dove straight towards the massive wall of ice and rock that Todoroki had created. On the viewscreen, asteroids the size of skyscrapers loomed, a horrifying cosmic graveyard. Warp field engaged. The helm officer yelled, his face slick with sweat. The world outside the viewscreen dissolved into a tunnel of swirling, distorted light. But this time, it wasn't clean. Massive dark shapes, the asteroids shot past them, so close it felt like you could reach out and touch them. A proximity alarm shrieked as a city block-sized chunk of ice missed their port nacelle by less than 20 meters. The ship groaned and screamed under the gravitational strain, alarms blaring from every console. It was like flying through a collapsing mountain range at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. They burst out of the debris field on the far side of the gas giant, the ship shuddering violently as it settled back into real space. The viewscreen now showed the calm, empty void. Behind them, Dagobah Prime eclipsed the battlefield, blocking them from sight and sensors. They had done it. They had escaped. The bridge was a cacophony of warning sirens and damage reports. Hull integrity at 67%. Minor breaches on decks 5 and 9. Shields are down. Main power is fluctuating. Warp core is unstable from the strain, but they were alive. Battered, bleeding, but alive. Izuku stood in the center of the controlled chaos, the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. He had saved the fleet. He had escaped the trap, but he could still see the ghost of the Daigoro, a fading afterimage burned onto his retinas. He could feel the weight of 154 lives settling upon his soul, a burden he knew he would carry forever. The battle was over, but for Commander Izuku Midoriya, the war inside had just begun. The silence that followed their escape was a different kind of void. It wasn't the quiet of the cosmos or the tense stillness of a patrol. It was a heavy, wounded silence, thick with the ghosts of the dead and the acrid tang of ozone from fried circuits. The UA was no longer a proud flagship slicing through the stars. It was a wounded beast, limping through the dark, its breaths coming in the ragged groans of stressed metal and the frantic hisses of emergency atmospheric seals. Izuku had ordered them into a stellar nursery, a vast, chaotic nebula where the universe was still birthing stars. It was a place of roiling hydrogen clouds, crackling electromagnetic fields, and dense pockets of stellar dust, a perfect hiding place. The vibrant, swirling colors of the nebula, a breathtaking vista of cosmic creation, felt like a cruel mockery of the destruction they had just endured. From the bridge, now running on emergency power and lit by the cold, red glow of backup lighting, The nebula's beauty was an accusation. The immediate chaos of the escape had subsided, replaced by the grim, methodical work of damage control. Ida, a stoic and unwavering anchor in the storm, coordinated the efforts with machine-like precision. His voice, crisp and clear, cut through the low hum of failing systems, directing engineering teams, rerouting power, and prioritizing repairs. Engineering, I need a full diagnostic on the port plasma conduits. Sealed decks 8 through 10. Life support is compromised. Medical teams to triage in the main hangar bay. All non-essential personnel are to remain in quarters. But his efficiency couldn't patch the holes in their morale. The psychic lullaby of the harvester was gone, but its echo remained. It had planted seeds of doubt and fear in the crew, and the frantic, costly escape had watered them. Men and women who had faced down hegemony fleets with steely resolve now jumped at shadows, their eyes holding a haunted, distant look. They had not just been attacked, they had been violated, their very minds a battlefield. Izuku stood on the darkened command bridge, his hands gripping the cool metal of the railing in front of the view screen. He wasn't watching the nebula, he was watching the reflection of his own face in the plexiglass, and he didn't recognize the man staring back. The commander's mask was gone, shattered. In its place was a pale, hollow-eyed young man, his uniform smudged with soot, his expression a tight knot of grief and self-loathing. The name of the frigate he'd sacrificed was a repeating mantra in his head. Daigoro. 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 He had pulled up the crew manifest. 154 names. He had started to read them, to look at their service photos, before a wave of nausea so profound had forced him to stop. He had known some of them. Commander Agamotto had a daughter starting at the academy next term. The chief engineer had been 3 weeks from retirement. A commander bears the weight so their soldiers don't have to. The words felt like ash in his mouth. He wasn't bearing the weight. He was being crushed by it. The turbolift doors behind him hissed open with a pneumatic sigh that sounded unnaturally loud in the somber quiet. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The sheer, explosive pressure that entered the room with him was as recognizable as a fingerprint. Katsuki Bakugo strode onto the bridge. His flight suit was scorched in several places, and a fresh cut bled freely above his eyebrow, a stark crimson line against his pale, furious face. He didn't walk, he stalked, his magnetic boots clanking against the deck with a violent rhythm that made the other officers flinch. His Cerberus wing had made it back, but not unscathed. 2 pilots were dead, another in critical condition. His starfighter, the King Explosion Murder, was a wreck barely holding together. He stopped directly behind Izuku, his breathing ragged, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The few remaining bridge officers suddenly found urgent tasks to attend to at the furthest corners of the room. 154, Bakugo said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. Izuku didn't turn. He couldn't. He kept his eyes fixed on his own haunted reflection. The frigate Daigoro. Yes. Don't you say its name like you're reading a damn report, you bastard, Bakugo snarled, taking a step closer. The air crackled with his fury. I saw it. I saw you throw them away. You hesitated. You waited until the last possible goddamn second, until that harvester thing was already firing. If you had made the call 5 seconds sooner, they could have fired and warped out with the rest of us. The tactical window was less than 1.2 seconds, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice flat, detached. It was the only way he could speak without his own voice breaking. 5 seconds sooner, and the harvester's beam would have already been in flight. The explosion wouldn't have intercepted it. It would have hit Todoroki. Bullshit! Bakugo roared, and this time the sound was pure, unrestrained rage. He grabbed Izuku's shoulder and spun him around, forcing Izuku to face him. His crimson eyes were blazing with a fire that was part grief, part fury. This isn't one of your damn simulations, Deku. You can't just move pieces around on a board. Those were people. You froze. I could feel it over the damn comms. The mighty Commander Midoriya, the boy genius, you froze up when it mattered, and you made a coward's choice to sacrifice them to save your own damn skin. The accusation hung in the air, a poisoned dart. Coward's choice. It struck the deepest, most terrified part of Izuku's soul, The quirkless boy who always felt like he had to prove he belonged. That's enough, Wing Commander. Ida's voice was sharp steel. He moved from his console to stand between them, a solid, immovable wall of protocol and loyalty. His face was grim, but his stance was unwavering. You are out of line. The commander made a split-second command decision under extreme psychic duress that saved this fleet from total annihilation. His sacrifice of one ship, though tragic, saved thousands of lives. It was the only logical. Logical? Bakugo shoved Ida aside, not with real force, but with a gesture of pure, dismissive anger. Don't you dare talk to me about logic, Four Eyes. Was it logical to walk into a trap we all knew was a trap? Was it logical to send in an away team when we knew the station was a tomb? This is on him. It's all on him. He's been playing at being a commander, moving us around like his personal toys, and now people are dead because of it. The words were a physical assault. Izuku staggered back a step, the impact more potent than any punch. Because in the deepest, darkest part of his heart, he believed it too. He had hesitated. For a fraction of a second, his mind had screamed for another way, a perfect solution where no one died, the hero-obsessed boy at war with the cold-blooded commander. That hesitation, that sliver of a second, may have been the difference between the Daigoro escaping and being annihilated. Bakugo's rage was not just about the loss of life. It was rawer, more personal. It was the culmination of a lifetime of rivalry, of a complex relationship forged in childhood admiration and bitter competition. Bakugo had always seen Izuku as someone who followed, who analyzed from the sidelines. Now, that same boy was his commander, giving orders that got people killed, and the injustice of it, the sheer wrongness of it in Bakugo's mind, was boiling over. You always thought you were better than me, Bakugo spat, jabbing a finger into Izuku's chest. With your muttering and your damn notebooks. You think because you can see all the angles you know better? But you don't know a damn thing about what it means to be on the front line, to watch your wingman's cockpit explode right in front of your face. You sit here, safe in your damn chair, and you play God. Izuku didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just stood there and took it, his green eyes dark with a pain so profound it seemed to swallow the red light of the bridge. He let Bakugo's words wash over him, each one a confirmation of his own deepest fears. He had failed. He was a fraud. He deserved this. He looked at his oldest rival, at the rage and grief warring in Bakugo's eyes, and his voice, when it finally came, was a quiet, broken whisper. You're right. The admission stunned Bakugo into silence. He had come here for a fight, for a screaming match, for anything but this quiet, complete surrender. Izuku's acceptance of the blame was more disarming than any counter-argument. It was my call, Izuku continued, his voice barely audible. The responsibility is mine. All of it. He turned away from Bakugo, from Ida, from the entire bridge. He walked, his steps heavy and leaden, toward the turbolift, his shoulders slumped under an invisible, crushing weight. He didn't see the flicker of confusion and regret that crossed Bakugo's face. He didn't see Ida's look of profound concern. He saw nothing but the ghosts of the Daigoro's crew. The turbolift doors closed, sealing him in a small, metal box, and for the first time since he had been given command, Izuku Midoriya felt completely and utterly alone. He didn't go to his quarters. He went to the observation deck. It was a large, circular room at the top of the ship's saucer section, its ceiling a single, vast dome of transparent plasteel. In peacetime, it was a place of recreation, where off-duty crew could come to watch the stars and remember the scale of the universe. Now, it was deserted, dark, and silent. Izuku stood in the center of the room, staring up at the chaotic, beautiful violence of the nebula. The swirling clouds of pink and blue gas looked like celestial bruises. He felt a kinship with it, a place of violent creation, born from the death of older stars. He sank to his knees on the cold deck, the commander's uniform feeling like a costume, a lie. The strength that had sustained him through the battle, the cold resolve of one for all, was gone. In its place was a hollow, aching void. The whispers started again, not the harvester's song, but the voices of his own doubt, amplified by his failure. Coward. Fraud. Murderer. He closed his eyes, and the faces from the Daigoro's crew manifest filled the darkness. He saw Commander Agamotto smiling proudly. He saw the old engineer, laughing with his team. 154. And behind them, other faces. The spectral, shimmering visages of the vestiges of One for All. They weren't speaking, but he could feel their collective disappointment. He could feel the weight of their legacy, a chain he had just proven too weak to bear. He had used their sacred power, the culmination of generations of sacrifice, to send men and women to their deaths. He curled in on himself, wrapping his arms around his stomach as if to hold himself together. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. Then another. The pillar was breaking. The dam of his carefully constructed composure finally burst, and a wave of silent, racking sobs shook his entire body. He cried for the crew of the Daigoro. He cried for the pilots Bakugo had lost. He cried for the husks of the people on Dagoba Station. And he cried for the boy who had dreamed of being a hero, who had never imagined that the price would be this high. He didn't know how long he knelt there, lost in his grief. Time had ceased to have meaning. It was only a low, feminine voice, laced with a familiar, metallic curiosity, that pulled him back to reality. Interesting. My data indicates that a commander's tear ducts are typically activated by pride or a foreign contaminant. Your biometrics, however, suggest a severe emotional distress response. This is a suboptimal command state. Izuku looked up, his tear-streaked face illuminated by the soft glow of the nebula. Leaning against the far wall, almost hidden in the shadows, was Chief Engineer Mei Hatsum. She was covered in grease, her pink dreadlocks were tied back with a stray power conduit, and her goggles were pushed up on her forehead, magnifying her keen, analytical eyes. In her hands she was holding a data slate that was displaying a complex schematic. "Hatsum," he croaked, his voice raw. "What are you doing here?" "My Super Baby 37, the port shield emitter, was damaged during your aggressive parking maneuver," she said, gesturing vaguely with the slate. "I needed to access a tertiary plasma regulator located behind this wall panel. I detected your presence upon arrival. Your heart rate is elevated, and your cortisol levels are off the charts. Logically, you should be in the medbay or in stasis." There was no judgment in her voice. No pity. Just a statement of facts. It was, strangely, exactly what Izuku needed. He slowly, shakily, got to his feet. "I'm fine, Chief." "Negative," she countered instantly, her gaze unwavering. "Your statement is contradicted by all available data. However, I am not a medical officer. I am an engineer, and as an engineer, I deal in solutions, not problems." She strode over to him, her movements brisk and purposeful. She shoved the data slate into his hands. "You're focused on the loss. A logical, if unproductive, emotional response. I propose you focus on the gain." Izuku stared at the slate, his vision blurry. The screen was filled with equations and energy readings. "The gain? Hatsum, we lost a frigate. We lost crewmen. We walked into a trap and barely escaped with our lives. There was no gain." "Incorrect again," she said, tapping a specific section of the screen with a grease-stained finger. The away team's helmet cams recorded everything. Jiro was a genius. She didn't just record audio-visual data, she had her suit's multiphasic sensor running the whole time. It recorded the harvester's psychic frequency. His eyes focused. He saw it now. A complex, undulating wave pattern, labeled lullaby signal. When Uraraka created her counter-resonance, Hatsum continued, her voice quickening with excitement, it created a temporary null field. For 0.8 seconds, the two waves cancelled each other out. In that moment, Jiro's sensor picked up something else. The background energy on the station. The thing Uraraka couldn't identify. She tapped the screen again, and a second, much fainter signal appeared beneath the first. "This is the carrier wave. The lullaby is just the payload. This is the delivery system." Izuku stared at the two wave patterns, his analytical mind, sluggish with grief, slowly beginning to churn. A carrier wave, so the lullaby isn't the weapon itself. It's just broadcast on this frequency. Precisely. Hatsum beamed, her enthusiasm a brilliant, stark contrast to the gloom. And this carrier wave is the key. It's a bioetheric frequency, something our tech was never designed to detect. But now that we have its signature, we can build a shield against it. Not a physical shield, a psychic one. I can modify the main deflector dish, create a ship-wide jamming field that will make us completely immune to that mind control garbage. The implications of her words slowly dawned on Izuku, a tiny spark of light in his cavernous despair. Immunity. They could fight the hegemony without fear of their greatest weapon. Furthermore, Hatsum went on, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement, the data from the core. We didn't get the core itself, but Jiro's attempt to access it triggered a data dump to her suit's buffer. It was corrupted, fragmented, 99% useless garbage. But I salvaged 1%. She swiped the screen, showing him a biomechanical diagram of what looked like a complex energy siphon. This is a schematic of the harvester's main weapon. It's not just draining life force. It's targeting something specific. A specific energy signature. Izuku leaned closer, his grief momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of pure, analytical focus. He saw it. A specific notation, repeated over and over in the alien schematics, linked to the siphon's intake valve. A notation his universal translator was struggling with, rendering it as anomalous biosignature, singularity. They're hunting quirks, Izuku whispered, the horrifying realization crashing down on him. The life force they're draining, it's quirk energy. The ultimate renewable resource, Hatsum finished, her expression turning grim for the first time. And Earth is a 5-star, all-you-can-eat buffet. Suddenly, the sacrifice of the Daigoro was cast in a new light. It was no longer just a tragic loss and a meaningless defeat. It was the price they had paid for the key to their own survival. The data they had bled for wasn't just tactical, it was existential. They now knew the true nature of the war. They now had the beginnings of a defense. He handed the slate back to Hatsum, a new, fragile resolve beginning to form in the ruins of his spirit. Can you do it, May? Can you really build a shield? Commander, she said, a wide, confident grin spreading across her face, her eyes gleaming behind her goggles. I can build anything. Just give me the parts and get out of my way. As she turned to leave, a calm, quiet message pinged on Izuku's wristcom. It was from Todoroki. The text was, as always, concise and to the point. The frigate's destruction was a mathematical certainty the moment the harvester targeted my ship. Your decision was the only one that preserved the fleet's core tactical assets. It was logical. It was correct. Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. We are with you. Izuku stared at the message. Logical. Correct. The same words Ida had used. But coming from Todoroki, who had been the one he'd saved, they carried a different weight. It wasn't absolution, but it was solidarity. An acknowledgement of the impossible choice he'd had to make. He looked up at the nebula again. The colors didn't seem so accusing now. They were just colors. The universe didn't judge. It just was. The weight on his shoulders was still there. It would always be there. The ghost of the Daigoro would never leave him. But he was a commander. And a commander's job wasn't to mourn the past, it was to secure the future. He straightened his back, the simple act feeling like a monumental effort. The pillar, though cracked and scarred, was not broken. It still stood. He had work to do,